Israel has been coined startup nation. It is, I think by now, a well-known fact that Israel is one of the leading hubs of the world for the startup industry. There are about almost a thousand startups opening each year in Israel, and about 50 to 60% of them closing or shutting down each year in Israel. I will discuss this a little bit later. Many of the startups in Israel result from the cybersecurity ecosystem that is funneled through the Israeli Defense Forces and the Ministry of Defense in Israel. That has a lot of meanings, not only in terms of the industry, but also in terms of who are these entrepreneurs that are behind this ecosystem. What is it about the Israeli culture that creates that innovation? What makes it tick, and what is this all about? There's a major discrepancy between the number of startups that rise in Israel to the very low number of companies that result out of these startups and end up as large-scale Israeli companies. I got curious about this gap. What is it, on the one hand, that creates this startup hub, and what is it about Israel or Israelis or Israeli management that doesn't provide the groundwork for this ecosystem to flourish into real companies? Israelis, by and large, they glorify the lack of process. And by glorifying the lack of process, Israelis also glorify the lack of strategy. If companies that sort of need to grow, need to have sort of strategic foundation, that is not something we Israelis are good at. Not only we're not good at it, but we sort of believe in our ability to manage without planning. And we build a lot on intuition, improvisation. Another major element, I think, is the fact that Israel is a post-traumatic nation. What does this do to a generation of Israeli managers or entrepreneurs? Going back to my initial statement that major Israeli startups arise from the military. So what does it mean that management, Israeli managers and Israeli entrepreneurs grow up in sort of a military environment? Let's talk about the positive elements, or what I think are the positive elements. In the military, you learn to become self-reliant. You learn about camaraderie and about teamwork. You learn about what it means to be dependent on your teammates and so on. But also thinking of the military experience as a foundation for management. The military experience does not teach you win-win. It does not teach you negotiation. It does not teach you anything about marketing and sales, and it does not teach you anything about what do you do in a world without command systems, where you need to persuade, you need to move about, you need to tie people into your dream and vision. The military doesn't teach. The third last element that I talk about in this book is the fact that we Jewish people toy around with the idea that we are sort of the chosen people. We have this ambivalent relationship with the world. We admire anything that happens outside of Israel, let me tell you. We admire the Americans, and we admire the French, and we admire the Germans. We admire the Japanese. When an Israeli manager is appointed, he starts traveling, definitely if he's a minister or she's a minister, we start traveling all over the world to learn what is done out there, because this is where we want to bring in ideas. And yet, on the other hand, we think that anything that is outside of our country is not top notch. If you think about these three elements that I discussed here, one is the belief in improvisation, lack of structure, strategy, and so on. Two, the belief in the military as the sort of basis for our post-traumatic stress disorder, meaning we will be strong, therefore we will never be victimized again. And three, this ambivalence about who we are, Jewish, Israeli, and so on. You see a complicated, unresolved issues that have to do with lack of vision. And when you lack vision, you cannot build strong, lasting enterprises. So what are the lessons that can be learned, I think, yet from the Israeli experience? And I will now talk to you as an audience, but also tell you what is it that I say to Israeli entrepreneurs. Their challenge is to shift from cutting corners to creativity and innovation. And there are many companies that are able to do that systematically. And the more they sort of live and see how the world functions, the more they learn to do that. I think also that another lesson to be learned is the shift from power to strength. The fact that you are strong doesn't mean you have to exert power. So you can be strong without using power. That is another element that I think Israelis in this world can learn. And last, related to this chosen people aspect, I think we can learn, entrepreneurs can learn to sort of use less hubris and more empathy. The values that one can take from the Israeli experience, that rules are to be challenged. Israelis are good at that, and I think that that's an element that they can really bring into companies and help them strive. Israelis are good at out-of-the-box thinking, and companies that can systematically think out of the box and create these innovative processes can be better off. Israelis believe that anything can be done, and Israelis believe that relationships are key. If you look at Israeli startups, because the world is interested in Israeli startups, those who are followed or funded by non-Israeli founders or by non-Israeli investors are better off than those who are funded or followed by Israelis alone. That is, if Israelis manage Israelis and Israelis fund Israelis, the chances of the startup to survive is reduced. I do my best to persuade Israeli entrepreneurs or those who work with Israeli entrepreneurs that they need to listen, that they need to involve foreigners in their system, and they need to adopt management systems or else they will be replaced. If we summarize all this, there is a tension between innovation and systematic work. It's not easy to resolve this sort of tension because innovation is, in a way, anti-systematic. Innovation is about doing things differently. Innovation is about doing things that were never done before. Things that were never done before, by definition, have not been tried as things that were done before endless amount of times. So if you're able to put in one room this sort of innovative, out-of-the-box, not following the rules type of thinking, whether these being in companies that work with Israelis or in companies that do not but need to foster these kinds of values, and you're able to combine it with systematic management work, then you hit the jackpot.